Thank you to all of our panelists. Now we're going to go into a small, moderated space of questions and answers. Before we go to the Q&A for our audiences, please, I encourage anybody who's out there and has, because we're all, if you're here, is because we want to dream together. So please don't keep those ideas only for yourself. Please share those ideas and questions for the panelists and the comments that you have in the Q&A, so that we have something to work with after this 15 minutes that we're going to moderate. So to all of our panelists, I have here one question. It says, looking ahead, in what ways do you think the UN can best support local activists and leaders to create the vision and societies you envision, especially as we find ourselves in a moment of contest between isolation and unilateral action versus cooperation and multilateralism? That is a hard word to say. So meaning lots of people working together. How do we see this? How do you envision this type of work versus trying to continue isolated work? I think that you can raise your hand. I don't see everybody. Okay. You can open your mic and just, if you have something around those issues, you can start. Any of the panelists. Andrea, if you're talking, you're still on mute.
I'm
Yes,
not sure. I understood the entire question, but I'll address what I did hear from it. In regard to the support from the UN. It's incredibly important that we get the support to shift narratives. We are still, and thank goodness for OSF and WOLA and our other partners in our international work, as we begin to build and connect a international commission comprised of women, formerly incarcerated women from around the globe, to discuss these issues. The UN can help us to gather. The UN can help us to, bring those resources to help us to come together in a place where we can all come to. We are challenged by that, of course, COVID-19, but we will come to a time again where we can all gather and work on shifting a narrative that still in the United States and around the world, with the countries, with the women in other countries have expressed to us that still there are stigmas, there are narratives that are untrue, there are narratives that focus on oppression, and not narratives that focus on transformation. And so I think the United Nations, with all of its power, can really be an asset in helping us to amplify and elevate and to bring us together, to give us a platform to work from globally, to create the shifts that we're all talking about around the world that need to happen.
Thank you. Does anybody else would like to add to this idea? Where does UN role can help us bring people together, connect ideas, connect organizations? If you can, I have Kathy, Alexi, or Jonathan. If not, let me go to the next question. Yes, Jonathan. I see you turned on your camera.
In the presentation, we were all trying to ask the UN to come up with a different way to bring people together by going back to the way people lived. Because if you look at some of the mandatory detentions and how it came about, we are still talking about what it was before the mandatory detention. So whilst we are asking the UN to connect people to dialogue, they shouldn't forget that the dialogue should be centered on indigenous knowledge and how we can harness that against mandatory detention in terms of the content, or how to tilt the discussion and not to come up with something new and different that may not suit our system. And one thing that I must add is, while we are looking at the previous way of living and going back to pick what we've forgotten, we should also not discard what is currently being run. But how can we harmonize the two and bring them together to be able to foster a peaceful and coexistent society for all? Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I think we've all talked about various points on accountability. It's this idea of restorative justice. How do you propose to ensure accountability without punishment and retributions in case of violence? There's all sorts of different actions of violence, and we live in very violent societies. Some of us, in El Salvador, for example, it is hard for people to look forward and think that prison won't exist, when the only idea that people have in their head, and I think Oleksky mentioned it, this confusion between what justice is and what revenge is. And I would like all our panelists to give us an idea on how you think we can move forward on this idea of abolishing the prisons, but at the same time having accountability for our own actions. And maybe we will go in order, because this is such an important thing. I'd like you to remember it. We work with victims and people that at some point have committed crimes. How do we see those two worlds coming together? And can you name any examples for that? Kathy, maybe we'll start with you.
Hi, Rosa. I can't turn on my video.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Oh, that's a quite a question to reflect on. But initially, my thoughts are we need to redefine what we mean by crimes. So many non-violent acts committed by people who are in vulnerable communities are punished by imprisonment when they don't really need to be. And I think it's an important step before we can also go on to define what justice is for communities and how communities can still secure justice despite the absence of detention and imprisonment. So there's really a need to rethink the way we look at what crimes are and what needs to be punished and what penalties should be. And I think one of my fellow panelists said that there's really no need for most of the punishment that so many groups of people have to experience. So just some things to think about.
You. Thank you, Kath. Can Oleksky, are you there? Oleksi. Maybe he's having issues with the technology. Can sometimes be your friends, and sometimes it's not so fun. There you are. Would you like to add to this idea of accountability? And I heard you speak about this idea of how we're confusing justice with revenge, and how do we think about society, you know, when harm has been done, especially within violent crimes. How do you see those two worlds coming together to move forward? Thinking of the healing that we have talked about. I can't hear you. Maybe Jonathan or Andrea would like to, while Oleksi goes through his technological issues right now. Jonathan, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, let me give it a bite.
Thank you.
You know, when you talk about revenge, the same issue we were talking about is what I'm bringing to you. You go to court. The court gives ruling based on facts and evidence. And sometimes the facts and evidence presented to the court may be a bit biased, and there may be a miscarriage of justice. I ask, as a young person, if the court rules against me and I know that I am right, ask yourself, what do you think the average person who is not well disciplined will do? He will want to revenge because the court has ruled against him. Then I take you back to where I come from. I'm a custodian of our principles and values from the way we're brought up from the village and from the towns. When there is a crime, the chiefs and the leaders of the community sit down, and then they at that platform are able to interrogate, and you are able to express yourself. Even at that point, if their decision is not, you are dissatisfied with it, they don't give ruling. They find out ways and means to console you, to come to understand that life can be challenging sometimes. So at the end of the day, they are giving sustainable solution or redress to all parties, be it wrong or correct. For example, in the village, you go to steal somebody's property, a goat, and it gets to the chiefs and the leaders. They will get to your room, resolve the matter, and sell your TV set to compensate the person. Then they make sure they sit down with both of you to resolve the matter. If they go to your room and you don't have a TV set, they will then ask of the one who is the victim, do you have a farm? He says yes. Then you, the next person who committed the offender, you are supposed to weed in that person's farm for 1 month. And so you go and clear the weeds as a way to punish you. And then when that happens, you think that the society have been good to you, that they didn't take you to prison and etc. And that is why I'm saying, if we will look at other forms of deterrence or punishment in the olden days, it will go a long way to help us in these discussions that we are having, particularly when it comes to the revenge issue and how we can also find alternatives to this. Alternatives to incarceration is two. We have a project with market women. The market executives are trained as paralegals to resolve matters. And I have evidence to the fact that cases that could have traveled to court, they are resolving them amicably at the market through compensation, restitution, and a way to bring counselors around for the victim himself or herself to even receive some kind of talk to enable them calm down tempers, because at the end of the day, all we are seeking for is peace, coexistence, and safety for public. And that is one thing I wish we should also look at from there. And finally, we should also involve young people in community approach and citizen vigilante kind of interventions. When they are there to serve as checks for a crime, they can never be perpetrators of the crime. So we need to involve them, like the UN Secretary General, former UN Secretary General said, Kofi Annan, he said, no one is born a good citizen. No nation is born democratic. Rather, both are processes that continue to evolve over a lifetime. And young people must be included from birth. For a society that cuts itself from its youth, severes its lifeline, and it is condemned to bleed to death. So if the youth are involved from the beginning, they will be crime checkers, will be checking crime, than they becoming perpetrators of the crime. So prevention is key at this point, because COVID could have entered our prisons, we couldn't control, but we decided to prevent by the Ghana Prison Service. So can we look at preventing and minimizing the crime, as well as looking at reformative and other alternatives rather than imprisonment?
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. I want to read, and I don't know if Andrea and Oleksky still want to add to this question, that I think it's so important.
I would like to.
Yes, please go ahead.
I would like to, and I'll be brief, because I think it's important that we get away from these use of the false dichotomy between violent and nonviolent. It doesn't exist. It's something that was created to further oppress and control folks and to legitimize the incarceration of people. And so, sorry about that. And so I think that is very important. In our communities that have been most directly affected by the carceral system, we have levels of complexities in the lives of people due to capitalism, imperialism, the poverty levels, the lack of opportunity to address trauma. These things all result in there's no clear, bright line between those who cause harm to other people or create transgressions that cause harm, and people who are at the other end, at the receiving end of that harm. There's just no bright line. And so we have to get away from describing things as victim or offender or using language like that. It's part of the work of shifting that narrative because it's just not true. We have to get to a place where we are actually looking at the causes of this. Interpersonal causes and systemic causes, and to allocate the resources to create those shifts. It's why we work from one of our foundational building blocks in reimagining communities is transformative justice. Much of what Jonathan was referring to in regard to the community people-led process, that actually if somebody causes harm to another person or to an entity, that they're reminded first how much they're loved, who do they belong to, where do they come from, what are the underlying issues in your life right now that are causing you to do something that is causing harm, and to help people to also understand that it's harm that they're causing. And so there's a lot of work to do, but we do it under the apparatus of transformative justice, because many of our people say restorative justice is great and there's a place for it, but we want transformative justice because we don't necessarily just want to stop at restorative justice, because we don't always want to restore where we started from when the transgression happened. We want to transform, we want to remind and provide and reallocate resources. Otherwise, we're just throwing people onto a prison bunk. And in instances where egregious harm to another human being is caused, just throwing somebody in prison doesn't help us to figure out what do we have to do in society with people who aren't in prison to do more research to help people to not get to a place in their lives. They weren't born in a place of where they wanted to cause egregious harm, but how did we fail people as human beings in society and to not provide what everybody in society needs, the love, the resources to not just survive, but to thrive.
Thank you so much. And I will like to read with this something that we got from the audience from Deborah Coles. She says, so many incarcerated people have themselves been victims and failed by state agencies. There is always a prison place, but not a refuge or mental health service. Always money for police weaponry, but not youth clubs. It's about redirecting resources to communities, about addressing poverty and inequalities, and rethinking community safety, and a more restorative justice approach. And what you were adding is a transformational justice approach. I have another question here. There's a lot of questions, and I'm not sure that we have very much time left, but it says, what would you see as a role of government prosecutors and judges that could help the lessening of the use of detention with an ultimate goal of ending mandatory detentions together? And I would like to give Oleksky an opportunity if he's gone through the technical difficulties. If he's there, yes, I can hear you. It's cutting off. No. Kathy, would you like to add to this? How do you see? The question is, what would you see as the role of the government prosecutors and judges that could help the lessening of the use of detention with an ultimate goal of ending mandatory detention altogether?
There you go. Hi, Rosa.
Hi.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to turn my camera
Yay.
on. I think prosecutors, judges, and other institutions in the criminal justice system have an important role in that, because they're the ones who are deciding whether cases should be filed, and the judges also can decide whether, for instance, in our situation in the Philippines, it's the judges who can decide whether person can enter into plea bargaining and no longer have to go through detention. So I think, despite the limitations of what existing laws require judges and prosecutors to do, they do have some leeway where they don't have to always, decide to send someone to jail, or decide to send someone, or to file criminal cases against people. And I think in this regard, we also need to engage judges, prosecutors, public defenders. So we could also, inform them and allow them to share their own experiences, from which we in the community can also learn. So there has to be spaces where there's interaction between the institutions of the criminal justice system and the people who are affected by the decisions that they are making. I hope what I'm trying to say is making sense. It's almost midnight and I'm a bit sleepy, but I hope what I'm trying to get across is clear. If prosecutors, judges, public defenders, and all the other institutions in the criminal justice system are open to communicating with the people who are directly affected by the decisions that they are making, I hope that they will be less likely to come up with decisions that are heavily prosecutorial. I'm trying to think of a simpler word, where coming out with more proportionate decisions that would be more just in the long run. And I hope at some point they would also recognize that mandatory detention really causes more damage to society than the good that they supposedly intend. So yeah, my point.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you for doing this effort of being at midnight, trying to put thoughts and words together. And Andrea, do you have something to add to this question about the role of prosecutors and judges and what Kathy was mentioning, for them to be aware also to the consequences of that mandatory detention?
Well, I mean,
And then I would like to go, yeah.
I think prosecutors should just stop prosecuting. You know, prosecutors have been the gatekeepers of the uptick in incarceration in this country. It's because of prosecutors that we have become the most incarcerated country on the planet, because prosecutors are the ones that decide what they're going to charge people with, what kind of time they're going to ask for. Prosecutors in particular, for instance, in the situations of mandatory minimum sentencing, they're the ones that demand that. They're the ones that push people and charge people in ways that they become eligible for mandatory minimum sentences. In the system that I was in the federal system, the majority of women who are there are serving mandatory minimum sentences. That's because a prosecutor forced them through conspiracy laws or something else into the realm of eligibility to be sentenced under a mandatory minimum. Prosecutors do that. Prosecutors determine and decide the fate of people in the criminal legal system. They should just stop doing that. They should also, for people who are already in there, they should aggressively, in each of their offices, determine whether or not there are people who need to have a second look. And it should be done in a very timely manner as we work towards abolition. We should be looking every opportunity to move people out of prison that have been there for just way too long. This is the work of our incredible comrades at Release Aging People in Prison, RAP, Jose Saldana, a formerly incarcerated person who is working very hard, and we're looking at the work that they're doing and replicating those models to help push people out who need to come home. Prosecutors do that though. So that's what they should think about. And judges, imagine if judges just step down collectively. I'm not talking about the canons of what judges are ascribed to hold. I'm talking about them as human beings, recognizing an absolutely unjust, discriminatory, racist system for judges to literally band together and step back to refuse to move forward until this system is transformed. That would be incredible.
I have a follow-up question, Andrea. It says, you say the US incarceration system is based on racism and that we should abolish prisons. Do you think this is the case for all prisons in the world, or very specifically in the US?
Well, I mean, we know, and we've learned from Ruth Wilson Gilmore, we've learned from Angela Davis, who has taught us for decades now about the importance of us understanding imperialism, about the importance of understanding the influence that the United States has had on punitive policies around the globe. And so when we think about that, certainly we have had the privilege of traveling to other countries, which is the absolute importance of helping us to further develop out this global commission of formerly incarcerated women so that we can learn from one another. But we certainly have learned from our Latin American sisters, for instance, where we mostly have gone to Latin American countries, that even in countries where everybody is the same, the influence of the racist United States system on the policies of other countries, particularly in the war on drugs and drug policies, has had a dramatic influence rather. And so I do think absolutely that racism, global racism, which is an issue globally. You know, slavery was a global issue. The sale and indoctrination and the oppression and control for labor of Black people, of African people in the world, that was a global issue. And so and the policies that came out of the oppression and control of African people are a result of criminal legal systems across the globe. So I would have to agree.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think we're getting to a closing space because this is like the song says, this is the end. But I would love to give Alexi one more chance. Hopefully we've gone through the technical difficulties. I don't know if you can add to this discussion. And then Jonathan, I would like you to yes.
Correction, a question. Which question to ask to Alexei? I'm his interpreter. I will be helping him.
Yes, the question is around the issue of what the role of prosecution and judges and the system should be in order for us to move forward into this idea of changing the prison system.
Okay. I will ask him. Maybe other speaker would want to speak first while I will be translating the questions.
Okay. Okay. And then we go right back to Alexi. Jonathan, would you like to add?
Yes, just a comment. In terms of prosecutors, I think we would rather have to reorient the notion or the perception or the way prosecutors handle cases. They are always looking to enrich, most of them are always looking to enrich their CVs by the number of convictions they have been able to attain. That is very wrong. If the person is innocent and you convict the person and you add it to your CV, it does not speak well of a good prosecutor. And you know, all over the world, majority of the prosecutors are always looking for conviction and not justice. Seeking for justice is different from seeking for conviction. So we need to let people know, prosecutors get reoriented to that extent. Now, when it comes to the judges, with the Justice for All program, for example, a young man was charged for a second-degree felony, which was threatening the mother, threat to death, because he was angry. When we sat in the court, the judge allowed the mother to come in. The guy knelt down before the mother in court, and then the guy apologized and said he has regretted from what he was doing. This one, it takes some special judges to understand it from that angle, that let's also add some little, as much as I'm applying the law, I'll apply the law, but some of the cases and the charges demand a humane way of handling it. In terms of drug use, for example, we have our laws. To some extent, the judge can sentence you. So we are entreating judges, for example, to apply for, use their discretion to let drug users seek treatment where they need it rather than going to prison. So they have the discretion and they can be able to play around it in a way not to send people into prison. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going directly to Oleski.
Alexei, вам слово.
Так, спасибо.
I'll be translating it in a translation mode into English.
Сложности, которые происходят, и хочу ответить на те вопросы, которые были адресованы мне. Я считаю, что у каждого преступления, совершения каждого преступления есть причина. Если мы говорим о тяжких преступлениях, то часто можно увидеть, что причиной совершения преступлений является, например, алкогольная зависимость, потому что львиная доля преступлений совершается именно в этом состоянии. И основная задача исправительной системы должна заключаться в том, чтобы максимально компенсировать ущерб для пострадавшей стороны, но в том числе максимально сделать все возможное для того, чтобы человек в дальнейшем не совершал подобное преступление. То есть и здесь делать упор на причину совершения преступлений, а
Sorry for the Russian interpreter. You can now speak to the floor, if you and listen to the Russian channel.
Okay. I just
Hello, Alexei.
hearing Alexei.
Thanks.
Окей. Алексей, пожалуйста, продолжайте.
Translation.
I'm sorry, I just can't hear him on my devices.
Oh,
Somebody
okay.
is changing constantly the...
We're very eager and grateful for Alexei and his patient to do this.
Okay. Can you
Thank you
hear
for
me?
the translator. I can hear you in English, in the English channel, yes.
So can you confirm that you can't hear Alexei in the Russian interpretation channel? Is that the problem?
No, I could hear him before, and then I think somebody switched the floors, and I stopped hearing him.
Yeah, but did you try to add him like to the channel, to the Russian channel? I can also remove you as an interpreter, and it might work, but it might not. So you were hearing him, but did people manage to hear before, like to listen Alexei? Rosa, could you listen him before? I mean, to listen the interpretation?
Yes.
Can we hear the
I was interpreting
short version
English.
in English?
Can you
Keynote speaker?
Yeah,
I really would have.
Just let us try just one thing. If you can please.
Okay. One last time.
Yeah, to the Russian interpreter, if you can speak to the floor.
I am right now. Yes.
We can do it. Would be the closing words for this panel, because we're getting to the end of the process. So can we try it one more time?
Try if you can hear now. Listen to Alexei. Ask him to speak.
Алексей, можете продолжить свою речь. Извиняемся за технические неполадки.
You should be hear him from the Russian channel.
Oh my gosh, out of the discussion, but we are really getting to the end of our time, and we need to move forward on our keynote speaker. Can I just, to close off with this process, I think that one of the most important things that we're trying to, the message put this picture that we're talking about healing and transformation, and that we need to put that direction in from one day to the next. And this is about how do we redefine what we understand about what is the kind of society that we want to have. And in order for us to think, who needs fixing, you know, quote unquote? Is it the people that at some point in their life have committed a crime, or is it us as society that we need to change in order for us to have the right, enable the right conditions for healing and transformation to happen? Thank you very much for everybody to listen to this panel. I am letting him take the floor back so that he can present our next keynote speaker. Thank you. But time is always against us. But definitely, this is just one more step in the many steps that we need to take in the future.